My name is Bernadette Holloway, and this story, it starts with $67. Not 1,000, not 10,000. Just 67 missing from my checking account. A number so small it would slide past most people. But I spent 30 years working as a bank teller. I remember numbers like I remember birthdays. And this one was wrong. At first I thought maybe I'd double paid a bill. That happens. I opened my laptop. My hands are slower now, a little stiffer, but my mind isn't. I scanned through my account. Then I saw it. A charge from an online store. I'd never used an app for children's games. I don't have children. My son David has a child. My grandson Tyler is 10 and glued to his tablet like it's life support. But I didn't buy him anything. Not recently. Not $67 worth of dragons and diamonds and cartoon cash. I closed the laptop slowly. Sat there. A voice in my head said, "It's just a mistake." Another voice, one deeper, sharper, whispered, "It's not the first." So I went looking. Every Thursday morning, David drops Tyler off at school and picks up my groceries. "You shouldn't be out alone anymore," he says. He pats my hand when he says it, smiles like he's doing me a kindness. I let him. I play the role. I even nod. But now I watched him differently. That Thursday when he left the groceries on my counter, I smiled. "Tyler's still loving that game of his?" I asked casually. He didn't miss a beat. "Oh yeah. He saved up and bought the expansion pack himself." Saved up. Tyler hasn't saved anything in his life. He once cried because I wouldn't buy him jelly beans at the gas station. Still smiling, I said good for him. That night, I printed 3 months of bank statements. I spread them out across my dining table like puzzle pieces. I used sticky notes. I color-coded. It was familiar, comforting almost. Until it wasn't. Because I found more. $92 to a beauty subscription box. $150 for women's shoes. $208 from an account I didn't even remember opening. But it had my name, my address, and my last 4 digits. They weren't just stealing. They were borrowing. Regularly. Systematically. I felt my mouth go dry. I hadn't been confused. I'd been robbed. By my own son. By the woman I helped raise when her mother died, his wife April. I remembered paying for their wedding, their first apartment, helping them after David lost his job in 2020. I gave them everything I had and still they wanted more. Or maybe they didn't want me just what I could provide. That night I didn't cry. I boiled water for tea and let it sit until it went cold. The next morning I asked David to come by. He showed up with his usual bright tone and his too tight hug. I noticed some charges I didn't recognize. I said. He blinked. "Oh, like what?" I handed him the paper. He glanced, laughed. "Oh, Mom, you probably clicked on something by accident. Those apps are tricky, especially on older tablets. I'll help you clean it up." He tapped my hand again, just like always. But this time it burned. "I'm sure you're right," I said. I smiled. I nodded. And I waited. Because I'd just decided to give them enough rope to hang themselves. The next week, the groceries didn't arrive. David texted me instead. "Hey, Mom. Crazy day. April had a migraine and I had to run errands. You okay to grab your own stuff this time?" Sure, I texted back. But I didn't go shopping. I watched. That afternoon, I saw them through the front window, April pulling into their driveway with 2 massive bags from a luxury grocery store. Organic. Imported. Specialty. Not the kind of food you buy when you're broke. That night, another charge appeared on my credit card. $78. To the same store. I sat there in silence. The house hummed with the sound of nothing. No television, no wind, just betrayal crawling under my skin like frost. I opened a new notebook, one I'd saved from a pack April gifted me last Christmas, still wrapped in gold foil. I titled the first page, "Things They Think I Don't See." I listed every suspicious charge, every interaction that rang false. I wrote down their words, their expressions, the date. David hesitated too long when I asked about my missing statement. The moment April changed the topic when I mentioned a refund I never got. And then I remembered something, my online banking password. It hadn't worked last week. At the time I'd blame myself. Typed it wrong, I thought. My hands shake sometimes, especially when I'm tired. But now I tried again. Still locked out. I clicked Forgot Password. The system said the recovery email had been changed. Not to mine, to another address, one I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I reached for the landline. I dialed the customer service number for my bank. The woman on the other end, Emily, had the kind of young, cheery voice that made you feel embarrassed for calling. But I explained the situation calmly, politely. I told her I was locked out, that I hadn't changed my email, that I suspected unauthorized access. She hesitated. I can't confirm that over the phone, ma'am. Not without a verification in person. Of course, I said. I'll come in tomorrow. Bring ID, she added. And bring any supporting documents if you have them. Her tone shifted just slightly. There was a pause. I realized she believed me. The next morning, I wore my best blouse, the one with the pearl buttons. I brushed my hair, pinned it back, and took my notebook with me like a shield. The bank was quieter than I remembered. They'd updated the floors, changed the chairs. New faces behind the counters. But I spotted one familiar name. Mr. Hollings, the branch manager. He came out to greet me. Polite. Pleasant. Too polite. We sat in his glass-walled office. I handed him my notebook open to the page titled, Things They Think I Don't See. He read for longer than I expected. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Holloway, I'll be honest with you. We've seen a rise in this kind of situation. He didn't say the word, but I could feel it. Elder financial abuse. The phrase made my skin crawl. They're your authorized users, he continued. They've been transferring funds to external accounts. The IP matches your home Wi-Fi, so it doesn't flag our system. Because I trusted them, I said flatly. He gave a slow nod. We can begin freezing secondary access, but you'll need to take legal steps to protect your accounts. I thanked him and stood up. Before I left, I turned to him and asked, if it were your mother, what would you do? His answer was immediate. Document everything. Then, call an attorney. That night, David stopped by unannounced. He looked nervous. Hey, Mom. Weird question. Have you been to the bank lately? I smiled. Yes. Why? He paused. It's just April noticed some issues with the card. I think there's something wrong with your account. I tilted my head. Oh, I'm sure there is. His eyes flicked across my face. And in that moment, I saw it. Not guilt. Fear. Because he knew. Somehow he knew I wasn't confused anymore. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I bought a camera. A discreet little device no bigger than a paperweight with motion activation and cloud storage. It sat quietly on the kitchen shelf angled toward my desk and the drawer where I kept my mail, especially the bank statements. I also placed a second one in the hallway near the office room door, just in case David ever got bold enough to try the file cabinet. I didn't feel like a mother. I felt like a detective. And in a way, I was a quiet one. A week later, I had footage. April let herself into my house while I was supposedly resting. She moved like someone who believed the walls themselves adored her. She walked to my desk, opened the drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope with my name on it, and slid it into her purse. Just like that. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't trembling. She was casual, entitled. And worst of all, she smiled while doing it. That evening, David texted me again. Everything okay with your debit card? April tried to use it at the pharmacy and it said declined. Weird, right? Weird. Yes, so weird that the account had been transferred to a new bank under my full control that very morning. I didn't reply. Instead, I rewatched the footage, paused on her smile, burned it into my mind. 2 days later, David showed up. He didn't knock. He used his key. I was in the living room pretending to read. He walked in with an air of exaggerated calm. Hey, Mom. You doing all right? You've been kind of quiet. I looked up. Just resting. He nodded, sat across from me. Listen, April's feeling a little hurt. You haven't answered her texts. She thinks you're upset. I raised an eyebrow. Should she be worried? David chuckled. No, of course not. I mean, it's not like anyone's done anything wrong. There it was. The preamble to gaslighting. Actually, I said softly, I think I may have lost something. A bank statement. I'm sure it's here somewhere, but funny enough, it's just gone. He froze. Just enough. You probably misplaced it. No doubt. I leaned forward. Of course, if someone else moved it, I'd hope they had a good reason. His smile faltered. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, that if you're going to treat me like I'm senile, you should be more careful about your stories. Because Tyler didn't pay for his game. And April didn't earn that handbag. He stood, hands in pockets, shoulders tense. So you're spying on us now? No, I said, rising too. I'm protecting myself. Which apparently no one else is willing to do. He started pacing. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're stealing, I said calmly. Not just money, trust, dignity. He stopped. There was a flicker of something in his face, maybe shame, but it drowned under something stronger, self-pity. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for us? He snapped. The mortgage, the school fees. April's mom is sick, and you think that gives you the right to take from me? He stared at me. You wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't gone looking. The honesty in that hit me harder than any slap, and he realized it. He turned toward the door. I'll tell April to back off. Just forget it happened. Okay. But I didn't say okay, because I wasn't going to forget. I was going to remember every transaction, every lie, every touch of my hand he used to unlock my future and reroute it into his own. After he left, I watched the hallway camera footage. He had lingered at the office door, touched the handle, then walked away. He was still looking for what else he could take. I emailed the footage to myself and backed it up twice. One copy on a flash drive in the freezer, another hidden inside a DVD case marked Hallmark Christmas Specials. I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about making sure they never touched one more cent of mine again. And that when I made my move, it would be public, permanent, and unforgettable. The next step was subtle. I started forgetting things. Not really. Just outwardly. I'd ask David the same question twice in a day. Pretend not to remember the name of his dog. Once I accidentally called April by his ex-girlfriend's name twice. I stopped double-checking prices when they brought me groceries. I misplaced my glasses, asked him to help me log into apps I never used, left handwritten sticky notes with my passwords in places they could see. And they thought I was slipping. I could hear it in April's voice every time she visited. The way she'd tilt her head and speak a little slower, like I was a confused tourist in my own kitchen. You sure you don't want me to manage some of your online bills? She asked sweetly one afternoon, stirring sugar into her tea like she was baking innocence. Just while you're not feeling 100%, we could just get things simplified. I smiled. That would be nice. She smiled back. Too fast. Too wide. That night, I wrote a new list in my notebook. Things they think they've won. At the top, I wrote email control, password resets, helping with bills, groceries access, guilt immunity. They were building a fortress. But I was digging a tunnel. 2 weeks later, April came by with a new phone. Tyler's old one wasn't working, she said, pulling it from the box. He was so frustrated. I nodded. Did you use your card this time? She blinked. I added, sipping my tea. No, David handled it. Well, I just hope the bank doesn't flag anything again, I said, standing up. It's so hard to keep up with what's mine anymore. Her smile tightened. The truth is, I had already installed a tracker. My new account had alerts on every login attempt, every transaction. I got a notification while she was still in my kitchen. $729.99 charged to an electronics store. Under my name. Again. I had the receipt within 5 minutes emailed from the vendor's system. That was the final straw. I didn't get angry. I made a pot roast. I watered my plants. I trimmed the rose bush out back. And then I sat down and began writing letters. Not emails. Letters. To my bank. To my attorney. To a small local nonprofit that helps elderly clients report financial abuse. 3 days later, I got a call. A calm voice said, Mrs. Holloway, we reviewed your documents. You've done everything right. We'll guide you through the rest. The rest? That meant legal filings. It meant security protocols. It meant revoking David's power of attorney. Yes, he had that. I'd given it to him when I had hip surgery years ago and never thought to change it back. Until now. It also meant surveillance. The nonprofit arranged for someone to audit all my financial activity. Their summary arrived in a sealed envelope 2 weeks later. They had drained over $18,000 in 6 months. It wasn't just a few apps and handbags. It was utility payments to their house, school fees, credit card balances I never signed up for. They'd even registered a store card in my name to get reward points. It was theft. With a smile, that night I invited them to dinner. I cooked everything they liked: rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, garlic bread. The table was set perfectly. Candles. Napkins folded into little triangles like I used to do when David was a boy. April looked radiant. David looked relaxed. They had no idea. I wanted to talk to you both, I said, handing them each an envelope. What's this? David asked. My gift, I replied. He opened his first. Inside was a printed spreadsheet of every fraudulent charge with dates, vendors, and dollar amounts. At the bottom, a signed letter revoking his power of attorney, effective immediately. April's envelope was smaller. Inside was a single flash drive. What's this? She asked. Footage, I said. You stealing my bank statements. She flushed. That's ridiculous. It's motion activated. Time-stamped. Uploaded to the cloud. David's face turned pale. Mom, you don't have to do this. I already did, I said, standing. This dinner was just a courtesy. They both stood too. The chairs scraped loudly. You'd really throw us under the bus over some charges? He asked, voice rising. No, I said quietly. You did that yourselves? I'm just getting out of the way. April stepped forward, tone sharp. You're going to ruin your own family. I didn't ruin anything. I built it. And now I'm locking the vault. Neither of them ate a bite. They left in silence. And I finally slept through the night. The next morning, I changed the locks. Not out of spite, out of principle. They'd both had keys for years, but now those keys were tied to secrets, to withdrawals, to unspoken violations. And I didn't want secrets opening my doors anymore. The locksmith was quick, efficient. When he finished, he handed me a small key with a smooth brass head and said, "Keep this one somewhere safe." I slid it onto a chain around my neck. Later that day, April came knocking. Literally, 3 short raps. No cheerful ringtone. No groceries. No smile. I watched her through the peephole. She looked different, still pretty, still pulled together, but something had cracked in her expression. A tension in her jaw. A forced patience. She knocked again. Bernadette. Open the door. I didn't. After a moment, I heard her mutter, "Unbelievable," and storm back down the steps. I turned and walked into my kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window in the sunlight. It tasted like freedom. That evening, David called. I didn't answer. He left a message. Mom, this has gone too far. April's freaking out. I don't know what you told the bank, but they froze 2 of our cards today. Can we just talk? Please. I played the message twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to remember the tone, the desperation, the sudden shift from condescension to panic. The power dynamic had changed and they felt it. The next day, I had my first meeting with the attorney. Her name was Marissa Stone. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She read through the file. I handed her my spreadsheet. The footage, the printed statements, even a copy of the voicemail. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Do you want to press charges?" I paused. The question hit me harder than I expected, because it wasn't just about pressing charges. It was about pressing back. Against a lifetime of being overlooked, taken for granted, treated as a source, not a person. Do I have to decide now? I asked. No. But if you want to pursue legal restitution, we'll need to act quickly. Financial abuse is harder to prosecute the longer you wait. What happens if I don't? They get away with it, she said plainly. And they might try again. I looked down at my hands. They were folded in my lap, calm. Still, I want to do it right, I said. Legally, thoroughly, and quietly. Marissa smiled. Silent consequences. My specialty. I left her office with a new sense of armor. That night, I opened a folder labeled Emergency Plan and added 2 new pages. Freeze on all joint credit. Update estate executor. Security cameras. Upgrade front door system. Then I wrote a short paragraph to myself in pen. You are not being cruel. You are drawing a line. This is not vengeance. This is clarity. The next morning, I received a phone call from Tyler's school. Mrs. Holloway, I'm so sorry to bother you, but you're still listed as the financial contact for Tyler's tuition account. My chest tightened. I was unaware of that. We're just following up on the payment delay. It's the second month it hasn't gone through. I paused. Can you tell me the balance due? She gave me a number. $2.243.60. I asked her to send me a statement. She did. And sure enough, the account was registered under my name, my billing address, my authorization signature copied from a years-old document I'd signed for an entirely different purpose. They had rolled my goodwill into an obligation, turned my name into a credit line, and now that the money was gone, they were letting the whole thing collapse like a house of cards. I forwarded the email to Marissa. She called me immediately. This is forgery, she said, and it's solid. I didn't say anything at first. Then I asked her, can you serve them? On camera. She paused. Why? Because I want the moment they're confronted to be recorded, not for the public. For me. She didn't hesitate. We can make that happen. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Marissa's team arrived. 2 legal clerks and 1 off-duty process server posed as an insurance adjuster for the first 30 seconds. David answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. April appeared behind him wearing her silk robe and holding a half-empty glass of wine at 2. Kimin. The process server calmly introduced himself, then handed over 2 manila envelopes. This is for you and this is for your wife, he said, without raising his voice. David stared down at the thick paper. What is this? Notice of pending civil action, the man replied. For unauthorized financial access, misuse of power of attorney and fraudulent activity involving elder funds. April dropped her glass. It shattered across the hardwood floor. The server turned and left. The whole thing took under 90 seconds. But I watched it 4 times that night. Marissa had arranged for a security camera team to stand across the street in a legally designated public area. I wasn't interested in ruining their lives on social media. I wasn't looking for digital pitchforks. I just wanted the moment, frozen, for myself. A day later, David called again. This time, I answered. Mom, he started. Please, what are you doing? This isn't like you. Oh, I said, voice quiet but clear. Then maybe you never really knew me. He went quiet. I don't want to fight, he said. We're family. You should have remembered that I replied before you treated me like a wallet. There was a long pause. Then he said something that knocked the wind out of me. We only did it because we knew you'd never say no. I couldn't speak for a full beat. His voice was calm. Not apologetic calm. Like he was trying to justify taking from me because I'd been too kind. That's the problem, I said. You mistook silence for permission. Kindness for blindness. I hung up. That night, I got a text from April. You're tearing this family apart. Tyler cries every night. He doesn't understand why Nana is suddenly being so cold. I stared at the message numb, then typed back. Tyler is a child. He shouldn't have to understand what it means when adults commit fraud. She never replied. I made a note in my journal. Guilt is their final weapon. It was true. The money was gone. The accounts were locked. The evidence was secure. But now they were reaching for the only tool left. Emotional manipulation. The illusion that because I was family, I was required to suffer in silence. But I'd already suffered. Quietly. Repeatedly. Intimately. They had stolen more than dollars. They'd taken agency, voice, peace. And now I was taking them back. The next morning, Marissa called. Do you want to proceed with a public restraining order? It's aggressive, but we can make it private until the hearing. I paused. No, I said. Not yet. Do you want to drop it? Not even close. I just want the next step to come when they least expect it. She laughed gently. You're more strategic than most CEOs I work with. I raised a family for 40 years, I said. You learn things. Over the next few days, things went quiet. No texts. No voicemails. No visits. But then late one night, I heard the garbage can roll. It wasn't trash day. I watched the camera feed from my phone. And there he was, David, looking over his shoulder, opening the bin and placing something inside. He left quickly. The next morning, I opened the lid. Inside was an envelope. No return address. No markings. I took it inside wearing gloves. Inside, a printed apology letter, a bank check for $4,000, a photo of Tyler with a sticky note that read, "He misses you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the envelope, put it in the drawer, locked it, and called Marissa. "Add this to the case file," I said. "Should we interpret it as partial restitution?" "No," I said, looking out the window. "Interpret it as panic." Because now they were reacting, not controlling. Now the fear was theirs. And I was far from finished. The next move wasn't mine. It was theirs. David's name appeared on my caller ID again, only this time he didn't leave a voicemail. Instead, I got a message from an unfamiliar number. It was a video. I hesitated before opening it. On screen, Tyler sat at the edge of a bed clutching a stuffed dinosaur I'd given him when he was 5. His face was red, tear-streaked. His voice cracked as he said, "Nana, please come back. Mommy and Daddy said you're mad." I don't know why. The screen shook a little. Someone April, I assumed, was filming. Her voice came from behind the camera, soft and syrupy. "Tell Nana how much you miss her baby." "I miss you so much," Tyler sobbed. Then the screen went dark. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood very still. Because they had taken the final step. They were using him. A child. A pawn in their apology. This wasn't love. It was leverage. I called Marissa. "They sent me a video of my grandson. He's crying. They're using him to manipulate me." She was silent for a long time. "Then I want to suggest something bold." "I'm listening." "Petition for financial guardianship of Tyler's trust fund if one exists. And if not, use this video to open an inquiry with Child Protective Services. Not to take custody, but to document how they're emotionally exploiting him to avoid financial consequences." Would it hold up? It depends on what else we can prove. But at the very least, it's pressure. Pressure. That's what I needed. Because while I still loved that boy, I would no longer let love be weaponized. I began writing my own letter to Tyler. I told him I missed him, that I loved him, that adults sometimes make choices that are hard to understand, but that doing the right thing isn't always the same as doing the easy thing. I mailed it directly to his school marked confidential. A few days later, I got a reply. It wasn't from Tyler. It was from his teacher. She wrote, "Miss Holloway, I wanted you to know your letter was received." Tyler cried, but he seemed comforted. He asked if you could come to Grandparents' Day next week. "I understand if you're unable, but I told him I'd pass along the invitation." I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. Not to call David, not to call April, but to call the school. I RSVP'd yes. The day arrived warm and clear. I wore my favorite navy sweater, the one David gave me before he changed. I thought about not wearing it, but I wore it anyway. Because history is messy and clothes don't carry guilt. When I walked into the classroom, Tyler's face lit up. "Nana," he shouted, running across the room. He wrapped his arms around me, tight, like he never wanted to let go. I held him, just long enough. Then I knelt down and whispered, "I love you, sweet boy, no matter what happens." He nodded. Behind him, I saw April, standing by the door, her eyes rimmed in makeup and exhaustion. She didn't say a word, just watched me, not with anger, with fear, because she didn't know what came next. And that made two of us. After the event, I walked outside into the sunshine. My phone buzzed. Marissa again. "Update," she said. "Our inquiry into David's credit accounts shows one opened in your name last week. An online store, $1 $200 balance already used." My heart sank. "I thought we locked it all down." "They found a loophole," she replied. "They're getting desperate." I looked out across the school parking lot. The children laughing, Tyler still visible in the window. "Then we closed the loophole," I said. And I meant it. That afternoon, I sat down and wrote a sworn statement. Attached bank records, timeline, emails, messages, footage, CPS contact logs, school communications. I sent it all to the district attorney's office. It wasn't revenge. It was escalation, because I had shown them mercy, silence, restraint, and they mistook all of it for surrender. The call came 3 weeks later. I was clipping hydrangeas in the garden when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. Miss Holloway, a firm male voice asked. Yes. This is Detective Cole, Financial Crimes Division. We've received a formal packet regarding unauthorized activity on your accounts. I'd like to ask you a few questions and, if possible, schedule an in-person meeting. I stood up slowly, shears in one hand, a pale blue bloom in the other. Of course, I said. I've been expecting your call. That afternoon, I met Detective Cole at the local station. He was younger than I'd expected. Professional but with kind eyes. He listened, took notes, asked thoughtful questions. When I handed him the flash drive with April's footage and David's voicemail, he watched them silently. Then he said, "This is one of the most well-documented cases I've seen. You've done everything right." I wanted to smile, but all I felt was tired. I don't want to put them in jail, I said. I want to make sure they can never do this to me or anyone else again. He nodded. That's likely, but there may be criminal charges. Do what you have to do, I said. Just make sure it sticks. That evening, Marissa called. She'd heard from the DA's office. They were considering multiple felony counts, one for identity theft, one for elder financial abuse, possibly wire fraud. The word felony sat on my tongue like ash. I had never wanted this, but I wasn't going to stop it. 3 days later, David showed up at my door. He didn't knock. He just stood there, palms out, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same college hoodie he'd had since he was 20. "Mom," he said. "Please." I didn't speak. I didn't mean for it to get this far. He continued. "We were just drowning. April said you wouldn't miss it, that it wasn't hurting anything." I said nothing. His voice cracked. "But I see now. I do. I swear." "I don't need your apology," I said finally. "What do you need?" "Boundaries," I said. "And space. Until the law decides what happens next." He exhaled sharply. "You're really going to let them prosecute us?" "No," I replied. "You let them." He dropped his gaze to the porch floor. His shoes were dirty, mismatched laces. A detail I'd never have noticed before. But now I studied everything. "I just want to fix it," he whispered. "Then take responsibility," I said. "Own what you did. In court, if it comes to that." April came by later that night. She didn't knock either. She sent a text. "Please. We were just trying to stay afloat. I lost my job. David had that surgery. You know how tight things got." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my journal to a blank page and wrote, "Manipulation always arrives dressed as justification." Then I added, "They will appeal to emotion. They will reframe the crime as survival. They will blame you for reacting." The next morning, I went to the bank. Again. This time to finalize everything. New PINs. Multi-factor authentication. All joint access revoked. New will filed and notarized. The teller, a young woman with bright green nail polish, smiled at me gently. "I wish my grandma was as sharp as you," she said. I smiled back. "Tell her to stay sharp. People assume we lose our edges, but sometimes we're just quiet while they rust their own." She laughed softly. "I'll remember that." Later that week, I got a letter from Tyler. Not April, not David, just Tyler. A hand-drawn card covered in glitter and marker stars. "Dear Nana, I love you. Daddy says we might move soon. Will you write to me? I miss your cookies. Love, Tyler." I cried for the first time in weeks, because he wasn't part of this. He was the collateral, the echo of all the choices that had gone wrong. I wrote him back that same day. Inside the envelope, I placed a printed photo of us from Grandparents' Day. On the back I wrote, "No matter where you go, I will always be your Nana, and I will always be watching over you." Weeks passed. Spring turned the yard lush again. The hydrangeas exploded in bloom. And still no word from the DA's office. Marissa told me it could take time. "They're building a case," she said. "They're careful when it involves family. But I promise you it's moving forward." In the meantime, I moved too. Quietly. I downsized. Not my home, my attachments. I boxed up photo albums and placed them in the cedar chest. I took down the framed family portrait in the hallway, the one where David and April smiled like a catalog couple, and Tyler sat on my lap beaming at the camera. I didn't throw it away. I just put it in the attic. Some stories don't deserve to be centerpieces anymore. I also changed my daily routines. Instead of watching the news, I played music. Instead of reading financial articles, I read poetry. And I started writing letters, not emails letters, to old friends, to distant cousins, to the version of myself I had forgotten. One letter began with, "Dear Bernadette, I'm sorry I let them shrink you. I'm sorry you thought silence was noble. I'm sorry you waited this long, but I'm so damn proud of you." It was the first time I cried for myself, not because of what they did, but because I finally stopped letting it define me. Then one morning the phone rang. "Mrs. Holloway." "Yes, this is Ada Reynolds. I wanted to inform you we've filed official charges. The defendants have been served. A court date will follow." I sat down. "What are the charges?" "3 felony counts: unauthorized use of personal information theft by deception and financial exploitation of an elder. And the consequences, if convicted," he said. "They could face jail time, but most likely a formal restitution order and supervised probation. We're also requesting a restraining order." "Will Tyler be affected?" "Not directly. But custody or guardianship discussions may arise if deemed necessary." I exhaled, slowly. "Thank you," I said. After the call, I walked out to the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was a soft shade of mercy. The wind carried no bitterness, just truth. That afternoon, David showed up again. This time, he stayed on the sidewalk. I didn't come down to greet him. I watched through the screen door. He raised his voice slightly, just enough to reach me. "I know what's coming, Mom. I got the papers. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. "I really thought you'd always protect me," he said, "even from myself." That's when I opened the door just a crack. "You mistook my protection for permission," I said. "You weaponized my love. And the worst part is, you didn't stop until the law made you." His eyes shimmered. "I don't know how to fix this." I stepped out onto the porch. Quiet. Calm. "You don't," I said. "You live with it." He turned and walked away. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. That evening, I began preparing something else. A document that wasn't required by the court or by the lawyer or even by society. It was for Tyler. A legacy letter. One that wouldn't be sent until he turned 18. In it, I wrote, "You were the best thing your parents ever did. And I hope you grow up to be nothing like them, but everything like the best of what they could have been." I printed it, signed it, sealed it in an envelope marked, "To be opened in 8 years." Then I stored it in my safe, next to the deed, next to the trust, because what they took from me wasn't power. It wasn't pride. It was clarity. And I had reclaimed it word by word. By the time the court date arrived, I no longer felt fear. What I felt was gravity. Not the kind that pulls you down, but the kind that grounds you. The weight of truth finally given room to stand. Marissa picked me up that morning. She wore her usual sleek suit and carried a leather folder so worn it had its own memory. I wore navy blue again. Simple, clean, respectful. I looked like someone who had nothing to prove, but everything to protect. The courthouse was cold. Marble walls, polished floors, the sound of hard shoes echoing through long, tense hallways. But I walked steady. My hands didn't shake. David and April were already there. April sat stiffly beside her lawyer in a gray blazer she probably bought for the occasion. David avoided my gaze. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in spirit. Like he'd shrunk inside his own skin. The arrogance, the excuses, the justifications, they were gone. In their place was something hollow. The bailiff called us in. I won't bore you with the legal details. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No tears. Just the slow machinery of justice grinding forward. The judge was a woman older, deliberate, unreadable. She reviewed the charges. She read aloud a summary of the evidence. Then she looked at me. "Miss Holloway, do you wish to make a statement?" I rose. My palms were dry, my spine straight. I trusted my son with everything I said. Not just my accounts, but my memories, my home, my name. I believed that raising someone meant you passed on your values. What I didn't realize is that sometimes people grow up and forget who raised them. I paused. Let that sit. They didn't just steal money. They stole dignity. Mine. Theirs. And they tried to make me feel like I was imagining it. Like I was old, weak, irrelevant. But I am none of those things. I looked at David. I was your mother before you knew what a conscience was. And now, I know the difference between forgiveness and enabling. I'm here today because I refuse to be complicit in my own erasure. The room was quiet. Even April had tears in her eyes. But I didn't care. Not anymore. The judge thanked me. Then she turned her attention back to the matter of sentencing. The prosecution recommended restitution and probation. The defense asked for leniency, citing emotional stress, financial strain, a lapse in judgment. The judge spoke last. While jail time is not being pursued today, she said this court recognizes the emotional damage caused by familial financial betrayal. You, Mr. Holloway and Mrs. Holloway are hereby sentenced to 3 years, supervised probation ordered to repay $18,672 in restitution and barred from handling or accessing Mrs. Holloway's finances indefinitely. Any future violations will trigger criminal charges. Gavel. Done. David turned as if to say something. I didn't wait to hear it. Marissa and I walked out into the sunlight. The air was warm, real, honest. I asked her, is this what closure feels like? She shook her head. Closure is a myth, she said. But control, that's real. And you just got it back. I smiled. Not because I won, but because I was finally free from pretending I hadn't lost something. That night, I sat at my desk. I pulled out a clean page and wrote at the top, things they'll never take again. Then I listed my voice, my name, my peace, my worth. I underlined that last one. Twice. Later, as I prepared for bed, I noticed something on my pillow. A letter, folded. No envelope. Tyler's handwriting. I opened it slowly. Nana, I hope you're not mad anymore. Daddy said we can't come over, but I told him I still love you. I miss the cinnamon toast. Love. Tyler. I pressed the letter to my chest. Not all inheritances come through blood. Some come through remembrance. Through choosing what to carry forward and what to let fall away. I would always love that boy. But from now on, I would only be the kind of Nana who protects herself first. Because love without boundaries isn't love at all? A month passed. The media didn't pick up the story. There were no dramatic headlines, no exposés. Just court records filed, consequences delivered, and silence left behind. But silence, I'd come to learn, is not absence. It's presence of space, of clarity of self. David didn't reach out. April unfriended me on every platform. Good. I had no desire to read curated lies masquerading as holiday photo captions. Tyler, though. Tyler kept writing. One postcard a week. Sometimes it was silly. A stick figure drawing of me in a cape labeled Nana Hero. Sometimes it was tender. I hope Daddy says sorry soon. When I get big, I won't let anyone take your money. I'll be your guard, I wrote back each time. Carefully. No bitterness. No blame. Only truth softened for a child's heart. It became our quiet thread stitched across distance. But even quiet threads can unravel. One Saturday morning, I opened the mailbox and found a torn envelope ripped clean down the side. The postcard inside had been removed. Gone? At first, I thought it was a fluke. A careless mail carrier. But the next week, the same thing happened. The week after that, no mail came at all. I called the post office. They launched a small investigation. Turns out, mail addressed from Tyler Holloway had been placed on temporary hold. Requested by David Holloway. Claiming family emergency. My jaw clenched. My vision narrowed. He wasn't just silencing himself now, he was silencing his son. I filed a complaint. The hold was lifted. But that moment sparked something deeper. They were still trying to control the narrative. Even without access to my money, even after legal consequences, they still wanted power over how the story ended. So I rewrote the ending. I started volunteering at the local community center for seniors. Not to give back, but to equip. I offered free workshops. Digital Safety 101, Protecting Your Finances. How to Spot Financial Grooming by Family Members. It was a quiet revolution. Gray-haired women with trembling hands holding up cell phones and saying, "My grandson keeps telling me to click this link. Should I?" No, I'd say gently, "Let's change your settings together." I became that woman. The one who'd been burned and built a fire station. The one who understood that predators don't always come in ski masks. They sometimes come in baby pictures and birthday cards. At one of those sessions, I met Evelyn, a widow with sharp eyes and a crooked cane. She whispered to me during a break, "My nephew changed the deed to my house, said it was just for paperwork." I didn't know I could fight back. I squeezed her hand. "You can, and you will." She did. 2 months later, she testified in her own trial and won. That night, she brought me homemade cinnamon rolls and a thank you card. We sat on my porch eating pastry and watching the stars. "You ever think she asked we were too nice for too long?" I laughed. "No, I think we were taught to be too nice. There's a difference." She nodded. "Not anymore, though." "No," I said. "Not anymore." I glanced toward the road. Still no visits. Still no calls. But I no longer checked in dread. I checked in confirmation that I was exactly where I needed to be. That night, I logged into my secure digital vault and began drafting something new. Not a will, not a report, a guide. For Tyler, what to do when someone you love betrays you. It began like this. You can still love them, but don't confuse love with access. Forgiveness is not an invitation, and silence is not a contract. I don't know if he'll ever read it, but it's there, waiting, for the day he grows into the kind of man his father never did. It was a crisp autumn morning when I ran into April at the pharmacy. I hadn't seen her in person since the court hearing. There was no warning, no space to prepare, just the clang of a shopping cart turning a corner, and suddenly, we were face to face. Her hair was pulled back tight. She wore oversized sunglasses, though we were inside. She flinched when she saw me, as if I'd slapped her by existing. I didn't say anything. I just reached for the toothpaste. "You win," she muttered. I looked up, slowly. "Excuse me." She took off her sunglasses, revealing hollow eyes rimmed in red. "This whole thing. You won." "We lost?" "Congratulations." I stared at her for a moment. "April, this wasn't a game. It was my life." She laughed dry and bitter. "Well, you've certainly made yours a lot quieter." "Yes," I said. "And safer." She looked down. "David's working nights now. Tyler misses you." I said nothing. "Do you even care?" She snapped. "I care," I said. "That's why I stopped letting you near me." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already walking away. In the checkout line, I could feel her eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around, because I'd learned something these past few months. You don't owe closure to the people who broke you. Later that week, Tyler's teacher emailed again. Apparently, he'd been asking if I could come to career day. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. What was I supposed to say? "Hi kids, I'm Bernadette, a retired bank teller, and recently a professional survivor of familial financial theft." But the teacher included this. "He said he wants you to come because you're the smartest person he knows about money." That got me, so I went. I wore a dark plum sweater, no makeup, just clean confidence. I spoke for 10 minutes about saving, budgeting, the importance of asking questions. I didn't mention what happened. I didn't need to. When the kids clapped, Tyler beamed. He ran up and hugged me in front of the class. No shame, no hesitation, just love, unfiltered, uncontaminated. That evening, as I walked to my car, April stood by hers. She didn't speak this time, just nodded once. A silent, bruised gesture of acknowledgement. I returned it. No smile, no forgiveness, just a nod. Then I drove home. Later that night, I opened a new email from the DA's office. The subject line read, "Restitution Compliance Report, Month 3. It detailed how David and April were struggling to meet payments, that the court might consider wage garnishment, that further consequences could be enforced. I forwarded it to Marissa and filed it away. But strangely, I didn't feel satisfaction, only distance. A clean, precise distance between who I was and who I'd become. I no longer checked my accounts obsessively. I no longer double-locked the doors. Not because I trusted them again, because I trusted myself now. I had rebuilt boundaries, systems, fortresses. But most importantly, I had rebuilt belief. Belief that I was not foolish for loving too long. Belief that I wasn't vindictive for protecting myself. Belief that justice wasn't about destruction, but preservation. That weekend I went to a bookstore. Treated myself to a hardcover edition of a novel I used to love. The cashier, a college-aged girl, rang it up and said, "This one's kind of slow but powerful, huh?" I smiled. Yes. It takes its time getting even. Back home, I lit a candle, made tea, sat in the silence I'd earned. Not the kind of silence they gave me through exclusion, the kind I gave myself through boundaries. I opened to the first page of the book, and for the first time in a long while, I read without fear. The following Monday, I received a certified letter. It came in a stiff white envelope with a legal watermark and a return address I recognized. Holloway and Stone LLP. At first, I thought it was another update from Marissa's office. But when I opened it, a different name sat atop the letterhead. It was from David's attorney. The contents were polite, formal. But beneath the carefully chosen phrases, I felt the tremble of desperation. Our client, Mr. David Holloway, wishes to propose a mediation meeting to explore the possibility of a mutual resolution outside of further public or legal exposure. This offer includes the opportunity for emotional reconciliation, as well as structured financial repayment outside the current court-mandated terms. In simpler words, they wanted to settle, privately, not to protect me, to protect themselves. I stared at the letter for a long time, not because I didn't know how to respond, but because it felt like the ghost of a bridge they had already burned. I called Marissa. I received a proposal for mediation. She sighed. Let me guess they're asking for leniency in exchange for pseudo-apologies and vague promises. I smiled. You know them well. Do you want to consider it? No, I said. But I want to respond. Not legally. Personally. That night, I typed a one-page letter, short, sharp, final, to David in April. I received your offer. I understand what you're trying to salvage, but this is not a negotiation. You don't get to rewrite history with polite language and thinly veiled shame. I'm not interested in performative peace. I'm interested in boundaries, and you've already crossed them all. The court may allow you to pay back what you stole, but you'll never buy back my trust. We are not at war. We are simply no longer in relation. Bernadette. I printed 2 copies, sent one through my lawyer, burned the other in my fireplace. The flames curled at the edges of the page like it too knew the truth. Some ties aren't cut, they're incinerated. A week later, the child protection advocate I'd contacted months earlier called with an update. Tyler's school counselor had flagged concerns about emotional stress, behavioral withdrawal, anxiety during custody handoffs. They weren't yet launching a formal investigation, but they were watching. I hated that it had come to this, that his well-being was now tied to a web of choices he never made. But I reminded myself, I was doing this for him, not to win, to protect. That Friday, Tyler sent me another postcard. This one was different. No glitter, no jokes. Just a drawing, a small house on a hill, a garden, a woman standing on the porch holding a watering can, and a boy standing beside her holding a flower. Underneath in big block letters, "When I grow up, I want to live here." I sat on the porch holding that card against my chest like a defibrillator for the soul. I didn't cry. I decided. I called Marissa. I want to start a living trust, I said. For Tyler. Yes, I said. But with conditions. He gets nothing unless he finishes school. Nothing unless he stays out of legal trouble. And nothing if he ever lets someone else sign in his name. Marissa paused, then said done. A week later, the documents were signed, sealed, filed. Tyler's name written in ink beside mine. A legacy not of wealth but of awareness. I added one clause to the trust myself. Not legally binding, just poetic. It read, "Inherit not just what I leave you, but the wisdom to keep it safe, even from the people you love." That night, I took the drawing of the house and taped it to the inside of my bedroom closet. It hangs there still. A map, a memory, a future I'm not promised but one I believe in. Winter came soft and slow. The frost painted lace across my windows each morning, and I found myself settling into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Not survival, not defense, but something gentler. Restoration. I lit candles before bed. I started journaling in ink instead of pencil. I learned to cook for one again, and it stopped feeling lonely. It started feeling intentional. Then, on a Sunday morning, a letter arrived, handwritten, no stamp. It had been slipped under my front door. The handwriting was David's. I held it for a full hour before opening it. Part of me feared it was another manipulation, another guilt-laced dagger disguised as apology. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I read it. Mom, there's no excuse. I know that now. I let pressure become permission. I let April become my compass even when it pointed toward everything wrong. But none of that changes what I did to you. You gave me life. And I repaid it by stealing pieces of yours. Tyler keeps asking why we can't come over. I told him we made mistakes, that adults mess up sometimes. He asked if that means you don't love us anymore. I told him you probably love us enough to finally stop letting us hurt you. I don't expect anything back. Not forgiveness. Not access. Just wanted you to know. I understand now. David. I read it twice, then folded it neatly. I didn't throw it away. I didn't reply either. Some messages are meant to end conversations, not reopen them. That afternoon, I walked into my guest room and sat on the edge of the bed that used to be Tyler's when he visited on weekends. The dinosaur blanket was still folded in the corner. The nightlight still plugged in unused. I smiled, then stood. It was time. I called a local therapist who specialized in family estrangement and trauma recovery. Not for advice, but for a plan. I'd learned to build walls. Now I wanted to learn when and if it was safe to place windows. She listened carefully, then asked, "What do you want, Bernadette?" If there were no fear, no anger, no judgment, what would you want? I answered without thinking. I want to be in Tyler's life, without being in their control. That's possible, she said, but it will take strategy, boundaries, and clarity. I have all three, I replied. She helped me draft a letter to the family court, a request for third-party supervised visits with my grandson. I made it clear, this was not an attempt to undermine parental rights. It was an effort to maintain connection where love still lived. 3 weeks later, the court approved. I cried when I read the order, not out of triumph, but out of something deeper relief that systems could still recognize sincerity. The first visit was arranged at a local child-friendly community center. Tyler ran to me the moment he saw me. He hugged me so tight I felt his heartbeat through my coat. "I missed you so much," he whispered. I knelt and looked him in the eye. "I never stopped loving you, not even for a second." He smiled. I knew it. We spent that hour building a cardboard castle. He told me about school, how he wanted to be an inventor. I told him about my hydrangeas, how I thought about naming one after him. He laughed. "Name the tallest one." I laughed too. We said goodbye, not with tears, but with plans. And in that hour, something sacred returned. Not just the bond between a child and a grandmother, but the belief that truth, when defended long enough, eventually makes room for joy again. Later that evening, I opened my journal and wrote, "Love doesn't erase boundaries. Love builds within them stronger, wiser, and kinder." I added, "First visit, completed, supervised calendar, approved, legal control, secure, emotional peace, in progress." Then I sat by the fireplace with a cup of chamomile and watched the logs flicker. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology parade. I just needed this: warmth, distance, and the sound of my own breathing, steady and whole. Tyler's visits became routine. Once every other week, we'd meet at the same community center. We painted birdhouses. We made peanut butter cookies. Once we just lay on the floor and stared up at paper stars some other kids had taped to the ceiling. Every goodbye was hard but not devastating, because I knew when I'd see him again. And that certainty, however small, was everything. April never attended. David showed up twice, once at drop-off, once at pickup. He didn't speak to me either time. But one day, Tyler pulled a folded note from his coat pocket. "Daddy told me to give this to you." I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a simple line: "Thank you for not taking him away from me." I didn't know how to feel. There were so many ways I could have interpreted that sentence. But in the quiet of my living room that night, as I sat rereading it beside the fire, I finally settled on what mattered most. I had kept my integrity, and I had kept my grandson. Not through vengeance, not through screaming, through boundaries. Unbreakable, undeniable. That week, the restitution check arrived on time for once. Only $300 of the total owed, but enough to remind me. The system, when well documented and persistently activated, can work. I deposited it without ceremony. Then I did something else. I called the local library and asked if they were accepting donations for their women's empowerment shelf. "We always are," the librarian said. "What do you have in mind?" "I'd like to sponsor a series on financial literacy for women over 60, practical tools, real stories. No fluff." She paused, then said, "That might be the best idea I've heard all year." The next day, I took 3 books from my shelf: Protecting Your Assets After Retirement Guardianship versus Control, and a memoir titled She Learned Too Late. I left a sticky note inside each one. "Don't wait until it happens to you. Learn before they assume you won't." The librarian called me a week later and said the program had filled within 48 hours. Sometimes justice isn't in the courtroom. It's in the prevention, the protection, the preparation. That Sunday, Tyler and I planted a single seed in a small clay pot outside the center. "Will it grow?" he asked. I smiled. "If we care for it, if we protect it." He looked up at me with all the innocence I was fighting so hard to preserve. "Like you protect me?" I nodded. "Exactly like that." We named the plant New Start. He wanted to draw a name tag for it. I let him. When I returned home, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not in my journal this time, but in a document titled, "For Those Who Think They're Alone." It began with a single sentence. "You are not crazy. You are not cruel. You are not too old to see what's happening." And it ended with, "You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to fight back. And you are allowed to rebuild quietly, powerfully, permanently." I saved it, printed it, folded it into a new envelope, and placed it in the same drawer where I'd once hidden receipts, passwords, and fear. This drawer now held wisdom. The final item I placed in it, a photo of me and Tyler, next to our little potted plant, smiling, still here. There's a strange kind of strength in learning how to live again after the damage is done, after the trust is broken, after the illusions finally shatter. I used to think dignity came from silence, from bearing pain privately like a badge of maturity. But I know better now. Dignity comes from discernment, from choosing what and who you allow into your life. It comes from understanding that being family doesn't mean being a doormat, that love to be real must have limits, that forgiveness without accountability is just surrender in a prettier dress. My story isn't extraordinary. That's what makes it important. Because somewhere right now, another mother is watching her adult child borrow her debit card just this once. Another grandmother is being told she's too forgetful to handle her own affairs. Another woman is shrinking quietly, folding her instincts under years of maternal loyalty and fear of isolation. To her I say, "You are not crazy. You are not cruel. You are not alone. You are allowed to question. You are allowed to protect what you've built. You are allowed to be the hero of your own story, even if it makes others uncomfortable." I didn't get everything back, but I got the one thing that mattered most: myself. And now when I look at the mirror, I don't see a victim. I see a woman who once gave everything and finally decided to keep something for herself. So if you're reading this and wondering whether it's too late to take back control, to speak up, to draw that line, let me be your proof. It is never too late. If this story moved you, comment below. Have you ever had to choose peace over people you loved? Subscribe to Grace's Truth for more stories where silence becomes strength. Share your story. You're not invisible anymore.